Greetings. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter.
Not even a little bit. Nope.
You want me to do the intro?
See, I would have loved to have had that whole thing of you eating that sandwich just so I could have it on a loop.
All right.
Over and over.
I'll do the intro.
And
My
here
wife
we go.
arrived with a late breakfast, and she's like, "Let's start the podcast." I'm like, no, I got to eat my sandwich.
That's
It's
right.
rude to eat in front of guests.
That's
I'm
right.
Why are you putting your hand
Three.
up, Rich?
Because I'm going to do
this
the
is
intro.
going in.
3, 2,
Oh.
1. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter. Where
Let's leave that hand bit in there.
Breakfast.
I'm gonna.
Mark has just finished eating his breakfast, and we missed it. I'm Rich.
I'm Sean.
As I'm looking to my left is Sean, and then to his left is the K-Man, and finally our resident breakfast consumer.
A very
Mark.
well-fed Mark.
Hey, what was that you were eating, Mark?
I believe it was a bacon, egg, and cheese croissant
From where?
With
sandwich
fries.
from Sheets.
Oh,
Because
really?
we don't break stereotypes here.
Well, we needed some gasoline, so my wife took
Morning
my wallet
fries.
and my car filled up.
You
with
needed
gas and got us
gasoline, so
breakfast
she went
there.
and got a sandwich.
You put some gas
Right.
in the tank.
Wasn't she a school teacher? Did you tell her that's not actually gasoline?
Both
Can't
both me and my car needed fuel, so
I see.
Sheets provided both.
Yes.
Now both have gas in them.
Now I'm eating
as he
french
continues
fries.
to eat his fries.
You won't eat the sandwich.
As you
but
can
you'll eat
see,
the
we don't
Fries
scrimp on
are
nerd
just a
culture here.
snack. They're not very loud. And I'm surrounded by dogs because they know I have food. So
Speaking of fuel, Kelly, you know, I dropped from, what was I the other day? I think it was like 182 a couple days ago. I'm down to 176 right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at
I'm telling you,
186.
that bike, I'm telling you, the biking works. And I am not restricting anything. I am
you
eating
would put
so
anything in his mouth. Trust
much.
me.
Well, given how much you're riding, you'll need the caloric intake.
Yes. And people say, you know, well, that's crazy that you do that much. Yes, it may be. However, I love eating. I'll be very honest with you. It's good.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I also dropped 3 pounds in 2 weeks, just with regular exercise and some weights. So
I'm pretty sure I found 3 pounds with that breakfast. So
Yeah,
we're
figured.
just trading it,
Mark
swapping it around over here. No waste.
gained 3 pounds with
Mhm.
regular non-exercise.
gonna move it from the
And
breasts
eating what he
to the
wants.
gutses.
That's All right, Mark,
Yes,
you wanted to tell us about something?
I did. I wanted to talk about The Creator
Okay.
from Gareth Edwards. So apparently I'm the only one that went to see it. My wife was very excited about it. The previews look good. So we went and saw it, I don't know, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, whenever it came out. And my first concern was the release date, right? Good movies come out during the summer. They come out during like Christmas, right? And those are your two big release windows for movies that are going to big. So something that comes out in September, October, I'm like, you remember when they used to have direct to Blockbuster, DVDs?
Right, yeah,
It was
yeah.
it feels a bit like that. Maybe they're better than those kind of movies, but they're like, we got to put this out somewhere. And so I was like, going in. Rich, why don't you keep that volume down? That was my concern.
Taken care of.
And unfortunately, I'm not sure. I was right. So I went and saw this movie, and we're going to do that sandwich method. It is a beautiful looking movie. Like, I love the cinematography and the visuals, and I feel like when he sat down to write this movie, he was like, let me pull, and I've heard some of his interviews, and this is the case. He's taken things from all the movies and science fiction that he loves and put them into a film. Right, so the visuals are fantastic. He's got this kind of old and meshed with the new. So you got old and science fiction pushed together with nothing in the middle, is what he said, and it looks great. It is a fantastic movie from a visual standpoint, from a cinematography standpoint, etc. Unfortunately, it just falls down in the storytelling. You know what I mean? I'm just like, this movie could have been great. And to fix it wouldn't have costed him a dime. You had to go back to writing the script. You know what I mean? Like, he did such a good job. Apparently, if you're into cinematography and movie making, which I am, it was filmed on like $5,000 Sony prosumer cameras so that they could be real like light and fast, right? And they went to all over Asia to film it, right? So they were one of the first productions that kind of hit the ground after the pandemic. So there weren't a bunch of tourists around, and they could go and film in a bunch of these, locations. They're in Tokyo, and they're, out in the, rice paddies and jungles and stuff like that. And it looks great. And it's very much a science fiction Vietnam movie. But it's just, it fell down in some of the storytelling, right? And so you have humans and you have these AI robots with human faces, but you can tell they're like, you've seen them, they got like the hole in the back of their head, and you can tell they're like an android type thing. And then they have full-blown robots who just look like robots, and they're humanoid and not. And I think some of the world building is cool. It starts out in like the 1950s, maybe, where it's like a newsreel type thing where you learn about kind of how we've developed AI. And so it's not, 20 years from now, this is what's going on. It's really an alternate timeline, which is cool. I don't feel like that was hyped up enough, because the world felt like at one point they go into like a Buddhist temple or something equivalent, right? And they have these ancient like carved statues that has like robots in it. And I'm just like, well, that doesn't make any sense. If AI came about in the 50s or whatever, 60s, it was a great visual. Like, I loved how they were mixing the old and the new, but it didn't make a lot of sense from a storytelling perspective. And so anyway, the AI, the humans, the Americans, whatever, we're at war with the AI. AI is in this fictitious, new Asia. So think all of, China, India, Vietnam area. So all the AI beings are over there, and we're doing the Vietnam thing where we'll fly in and, destroy a village. And we're looking for, I guess, the main scientist who will do AI stuff. And we're trying to, we found out they created this weapon, and, the main good guy flies in there and finds this kid. Hilarity ensues, and he's on the run with this kid, trying to protect him from everybody. So the kid is the MacGuffin, and the AI people want him, and the bad guys want him, and the Americans want to blow him up. And hilarity ensues, and all that is fine. We've had the Lone Wolf and Cub and the Last of Us, and that's a very well-worn trope of, I have to protect this thing that other people are trying to kill.
Right.
And the acting was fun. Loved all the actors in it. Loved the action. Loved the props and the guns. And like, it was great. But then they would just hit us with these dumb things that were like, okay, at one point, the Americans swoop in and grab him and the kid, and they're like, you did it, you got the you got the weapon. And then they separate them, and like 2 weeks later they're like, oh no, we can't destroy the kid, we need you to do it. And they take him to this base, and he's like gonna go in and kill the kid. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, if that's not how any of this would work. And of course he doesn't kill the kid, he like turns the off switch. And at one point when the AI dudes have the kid, they're all like sleeping because they're, I guess, plugged in to recharge. And he sneaks in and like turns the off switch on one of the guys and takes the kid and sneaks away with him. And like, that doesn't make any sense at all. If you're AI or you're a robot, okay, maybe you need power. Why would you all need power at the same time?
Right.
like you're at war. And it was dumb little things like that could have easily been fixed. And I get it, like in the one scene you want to show that they have a power switch, which is not the same thing as killing them, because that
Rich,
comes
what
in
are
with
you
the
doing?
plot later. He's being loud. He's stepping all over my review. But it's just a little stupid. And so anyway, they're taking this kid and him, and the kid has these powers where he can control stuff. And he's like, aha, and they crash the car that they're in and sneak into the spaceport to jump on a commercial flight to fly up to the big space station. So they basically divert this plane to go to the big space station that they want to destroy, because Gareth Edwards can't make a movie without trying to destroy the bad guy's big space station.
Right.
And on the ground, they're like, don't let them dock. Don't let them get to that spaceship. And then they get to the spaceship. And I was just like, on 9/11, we were prepared to shoot down a civilian airliner,
Right.
rather than let it reach, the White House or the Capitol building, right?
Right.
And you mean to tell me that we've been at war with, AI who's nuked, LA in the movie, and that's one of the reasons we're at war with them. and you just got to let a hijacked commercial space freighter who was on his way to the moon end up at your massive military, floating Pentagon. And then they're like, oh no, evacuate it. And it's like, oh, so everybody leaves that, and the little kids running around on it to like do some sabotage or whatever. And I'm like, all it would take is like a couple of guys with guns or the right locked door or something, and your plan goes to, so it's just these dumb little things that could have been fixed in the script writing. You know what I mean? Like, this could have been an amazing movie, and visually it is. Like I said, I don't want to detract from this movie. I'd go see it again. But the more I think about it, I'm just like, at one point, this guy, a human soldier is killed, and they capture this one lady, and I forget her name, but she's like some, colonel or something like that. And I didn't expect much from her character, because when all the dudes jump off the helicopter, it's not a helicopter, and run off into the jungle, she stays on the bird and it's flying around. And eventually she ends up back on the ground and gets captured, and she's doing some action-y stuff in the movie. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I really liked her character. It made a lot of sense. The character development was good. And I just wasn't expecting it from that character, but like it did so well. But anyway, they're chasing after this guy who stole the little kid who's the weapon, and they come on this truck, and one of the commandos was killed, and they ended up like overpowering some police who had them in custody, and they lay out the dude on the road, and then one of these robots, and they basically grab the electronic copy of the guy's brain and put it into the robot. But because he's been dead for a couple hours, it's only gonna like last for a few minutes. But that was a ridiculously powerful scene of like the guy wakes up in the robot body and looks over and sees his real body there, and it, realizes that he's dead. And so they're trying to question him, like, hey, where did what happened, where did the kid go, and these kind of things. But like that whole scene was like really well done. But then you're like, okay, well, if you can just back up somebody's brain and put it into like a body, then it seems to me like death doesn't really have that kind of finality that we're used to, and it's some of the world building. You're like, this doesn't make sense. It's cool, it looks visually great, but you're like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You know what I mean?
I've wondered about that though, because that's been a hypothesis for a long time about immortality and what can you do for immortality, and you could download your brain, or its algorithm, if you will, so that it could be replicated and perpetuated ad infinitum, right? However, the problem is that's not really immortality. You're still dead. You've got a simulated kind of algorithm for it, so you could see, but see, then that just brings up a lot of problems. That how you described it brings up a lot of problems. I understand what he's going for with that scene, but I don't know how you really truly pull that off, because in reality he is dead. This is a copy, the idea being that it's a copy of how he would act when he woke up and saw this, but really it's not. It's a different being.
Right. And that's a very small part, but as part of the world building, right, there's a bunch of these androids running around that have human faces, right? So are those all copies of dead people? Or not? And at one point there's like some advertisement where they're like, hey, go get scanned in so that these androids can use your face, right? And so this one guy sees his wife in multiple locations because they've scanned in her image, her likeness, or whatever, and so she spots him on a subway even though she's dead, or that kind of thing. So
it sounds kind of, from what you've described, it sounds very similar to like Blade Runner. It's got Blade
Runner, it's got Apocalypse Now, it's a very, and some of the tactics are military. Again, I can see somebody scribbling this on a napkin, oh, what would be cool, let's do this, and it does look cool, but then when you think about it after the movie, you're like, that doesn't make sense at all.
See, that's an
example. They have tanks that are the size of a 7-story office building turned on its side. Like massive tanks, right? And like these guys are
level stuff,
Titan level tanks, right? And you're just like, okay, that's cool, but the way they did it, it's like these tanks snuck up on the bad guys. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, because they hear like the trees crunching, and then they're like, oh, what's going on? And they're all hiding behind their sandbags, and you know, along comes this big tank. And you know, like the big tanks were cool. I'm not sure deploying them to a shanty village in Asia is the best use of that type of thing
Yeah.
when you have air superiority. Or they have these like big trash can looking, you know, things with arms and legs that are just walking bombs.
See,
And the
I
lady's like,
wonder.
go get them, and the bomb just goes running up there and explodes. And I'm like, again, really cool, very 40K-esque, right, with
Yeah.
your human bomb squads and whatnot. But I'm not sure how practical they are, other than to have a cool scene where the
See,
kid gets to
that's
use his powers and have it not blow up and stuff like that.
see, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like it's a number. It sounds kind of like what was the one? Oh, dadgummit, the one with that Zack Snyder did.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about with the World War
Three chicks
One
or whatever. Yeah,
zombies and
yeah.
Sucker Punch. Is that the one?
Sucker Punch. Thank you.
Yeah.
It sounds a lot like that, where you're looking at the trailer, you're seeing all these cool
Yes.
scenes, and you're like, "Wow, this is going to be really wild." What is all this? And then it's kind of not. It's a series of cool scenes, and how can I put them together in the same movie without actually going to a lot of effort to come up with something that would allow for that? It's an you know, so it sounds kind of like what you're talking about. It had a number of cool scenes that he wanted to put into the story and didn't really string them together in a cohesive, thoroughly cohesive plot line. And you know, that world building thing is tough. That's why I brought up the Blade Runner thing. You look at like Blade Runner 2049, those are written and put together very well. The storyline, the through line for them is done really well, so that as you're looking at it, you don't find too many holes in it. You think, yeah, that's pretty cool. And the cool scenes, you know, the visually impactful parts of it are there. Dune, to give it its due, is the same kind of thing. And but for the no, there you go. See, that way no one can say I don't like Dune. But also, you know, the one that really did world building really, really well was Man in the High Castle.
Yeah.
That one was amazing. And I love that genre where you do an alternate timeline thing. I love that. I love that stuff where you goof around with it, and you know what.
Yeah, and I don't think there was enough of that, because it was until after the movie that I remembered that kind of intro reel where it's like, oh, the AI's bombed LA, now we're at war with them. But it also showed that the research began like in the 50s and whatnot. And so like watching the movie, you're like, oh, cool, AI exists, and it's like 20 years from now or something. You know what I mean? Like, and,
you know, don't you think...
I mean, it feels like he was so close to the mark. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to, like, visually, it was a great movie. All the actors in there were good. Ken Watanabe
I love Ken Watanabe.
He's in it, you know.
Awesome.
I mean, there's not a green screen anywhere that I can see. You know what I mean? Like this guy knows his visual effects. And I actually was listening to, you know, some of the interviews where they were saying like he's filming the thing and he'll like, you know, pan up knowing that there's going to be a special effects shot of, say, a ship in the area, and he'll do the camera movements talking to the VFX guys. Like, oh, we're going to pan up here, and then this is going to happen, and then we'll have this ship flying and land over here. And so, like, he's a director who understands the visual effects side of it, and that is on display here. You know, he does such a good job. And I guess it was an $80 million budget. It looks just as good as anything that, you know, kind of Marvel, Disney, Dune has been putting out. I'd put it visually on par with any of those movies. It is a great looking movie. Unfortunately, so it's that Zack Snyder thing, right? It fell down, and to fix some of the script would have been easy, right? You know, like when the U.S. swoops in and they grab him and the kid, and you know he's really on the kid side, but the U.S. doesn't like know it, and they'd be like, "Good, we're going to take you up to this big space station." Now you avoid all those plot holes right there. You accelerate the timeline instead of having this 2 weeks later. And it, you know, just doesn't make any sense. Like I could see, it would have been easy to, not easy, but it would have been, it wouldn't have cost you anything to fix that part, because it would have just changed what you were filming, but it's not like it would have lowered the cost or increased the cost because of what you had. You already had all this amazing, you know, sci-fi tech fight scenes, all that kind of stuff in there. Just make your escape better than we wreck the car and run away on foot when there was chase cars and lead cars, and how are you and a kid going to outrun everybody? You know what I
See,
mean?
I don't know,
Into
man.
the equivalent of LAX and get on a commercial flight. Like,
I,
that's your escape plan? Come on, guys.
I don't know if I agree on the idea that it would have cost them nothing, right? Because in order to write a compelling story and put all the detail into that, there's other costs that are going to be introduced. But I mean, what you're describing to me is what I see in a lot of movies anyway, is that it's cheap effects and a a half-rate story just to put butts in a seat and get revenue. The number of times I've seen a movie that has a compelling storyline along with really awesome effects and cinematography is rare.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. That's what I was saying. Those examples that I get, and I know some of you don't like Blade Runner and stuff like that,
Who doesn't like Blade Runner?
What's that, sir?
I
Who
don't.
doesn't like Blade Runner?
I fall asleep every
I
time.
like Blade Runner a
Mark
lot.
said he didn't really get into, but he said, in all fairness, Mark said he should watch it again to see.
I should.
But that's why I brought those up, is because there are times where it's done really well. I think the trap is like with any other movie, you only have but so many plot lines that you can use before you end up going into trope territory. And so that's fine. You can do that, but it needs to be something that's really compelling then.
Right.
Because
And this
people
was
have seen
written
that
and
story again
directed
and again.
by Gareth Edwards, right? So this wasn't, like, this was his baby. You could tell
Yeah.
he put a lot of love and care and attention. And so I don't mean this to be like Hollywood messed up,
Right,
Mm-mm.
right.
which maybe
No,
they
he
did,
did.
but like I
It's
think
kinda
he's
like that's why it's like
he
the
pulled a Zack Snyder.
thing.
Yeah, that's what he did. And
Or
it's really unfortunate because this is so close to being an amazing movie.
or what's his face's movie? The one who did District 9.
Neil Blomkamp with
Well,
Elysium. Yeah,
No, I didn't
Elysium
like that.
was the same kind of thing. Yeah.
And I know who was Kelly. You didn't like that, right?
I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think his was done really well. I liked his storyline in that one too, and it had the eye candy, the dreadnought thing, the ship, and all that. I mean, it was done really well that way. So it was a cohesive. Not that it didn't have some things that were wrong and all that, but it was taking a trope and making it at least novel in how he told it. And so I think it's a very difficult thing to do. And Gareth Edwards, he's had
He did Monsters was his first one. He did
right.
Rogue One. I think he did one of the Godzilla movies, right?
Well, Rogue One, that's the thing I was going to bring up though, because because they did a lot of reshoots and stuff like that with it. Was he all the way through? He was brought in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was brought in at the end. Now, admittedly, he put the best thing in that movie that was there, which was the Vader scene at the end.
Yes.
So
last minute.
I give him full credit for that. But did he just? He didn't have anything to do with the writing on Rogue One, though, right?
I think they did some re-scripting at the end because they weren't happy with the way the story was turning out, and he, like you said, he was the one that added the Vader scene that was very last minute. Like they shot that
right. But again, that speaks to what Mark was talking about, where he has a really good visual that he's able to put into a movie. And directs it really well to get that visual on there. But that's why I was wondering, did he have anything to do with the writing? Because that's also the one that has the writing that we like so much, and they brought it over to the series, of course. And so that's why I was wondering about that.
I'm on the IMDb page for Rogue One, and he does not have a writer credit.
Okay.
On the page, he's listed as the director, but he's not listed as one of the writers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't want to speak out of turn. I didn't think he did, but I didn't want to speak out of turn with that. So maybe that's why that you had that confluence of the two, and perhaps they give him a little bit more credit than he should have with that. Monsters, I thought was okay. I thought Monsters was all right.
I thought Monsters was great. As somebody who's into filmmaking, it was two actors, an editor, and him driving around South America in a van, filming this movie for almost no money,
But
which
that
which for
was
what it was for indie filmmaking was amazing. That's what put
It
him
was
on the
high
map.
concept,
but that
yeah,
was
for a monster movie.
that was again, that was
It was
atmosphere,
very high
filming
concept in
atmosphere,
terms of
but it was
what
not
they tried to do.
really about the writing. That movie was not
Correct.
really
Yeah.
about the writing. And so you see that through line with his stuff that way, wherein, like Zack Snyder, he had 300, which was not written by him, but, good material, beautiful visual ideas for it, really well done that way. I'd even say the same thing for Watchmen, but when he starts to get into the writing side of it, like with the rest of the DCU, I think that's where you start to stumble, because you go all the way back to, what was it, Dawn of the Dead that he did, and established material, got the script for it and all that set already, good visuals, going through the whole thing, fun time at the movies, that kind of stuff. But he's not, you see in hindsight, he's not the one that you really want to give all the creative aspects of that project to. And I think Gareth Edwards may fall into that same camp.
Yeah, and like I said, I want to be clear. I'm a fan of Gareth Edwards. I like what he's done. I like the creator. I think it's an amazing movie, and one of my highest praises is, would I go see it again? Yes, I'd go see it again right now. If my wife was like, let's go see it again. She loved it, but I tend to like pick things apart, and there were just enough things that pulled me out of it from a story standpoint that I was like, okay, this is really convenient, or this doesn't make sense, or some of the world building, this was so close to being one of the best movies ever. And I hear that there's the original cut was 3 or 4 hours long, so maybe someday we get a director's cut. I don't think that's going to fix some of the problems. And part of that is he's trying to do this world building, because this is not a franchise. There's nothing else. This isn't derived from something else, right? Not a comic book or a novel or anything. This is an original science fiction thing. And I really want original science fiction things to, do well, but you have to have a good original science fiction thing. And this is almost there, and it's a real shame that it's not all the way there.
See, but this is one of those things with you, Mark, with your movie reviews, is that I know that you tend to be
bomb coming in.
No, it's not a bomb. It's not a bomb. No, you tend to grade pretty soft on these things because you like a lot of the effort put into even producing something. So when you come in and you have this type of a criticism, though, I have to take it with a little bit more weight and say, well, maybe it's, I would probably look at it as a little bit more catastrophic than what you're putting forward.
That's funny, Kelly. I was going to say
that's fair. I 100% believe everything you just said, because you're probably right.
I was going to say, Kelly, that on the scale, Mark is kind of like Mikey. He loves everything,
Yeah.
And so for him to come in and say, I liked how it looked, but it had serious issues, kind of thing. I was thinking the same thing you were. I really was. So on that same, that makes me think of something. Doesn't have anything to do with the movie making part. So if you wanted to say something else about that,
I'm done there. Like I said, I was just so close, but not quite.
So
there.
you remember our discussion about Rome and all that stuff, right? Well, I was thinking about Thermopylae. I was thinking about that, and Sparta and all of that stuff. And I forget how it came up, but of course, pops up in the mind every now and again. But I went and looked it up, and of course, I know about the Battle of Thermopylae and all of that, but I wanted to see what the different perspectives on that were, right? What people thought about it, that kind of thing. And I found something interesting, and it brought a question up that I wanted to ask you guys. So the Battle of Thermopylae and the 300 and all of that is held up as this seminal moment, this thing it's well known even to this day, looked up to, and that kind of thing, and a bar that was set, if you will. But I went online and started looking, and of course you have a lot of that out there, but you also have a very heavy opposing viewpoint where it seems like there's this vitriol towards the love of, that battle of Thermopylae and all this, and how you get a lot of stories or a lot of people out there saying Sparta was a myth, it's not the way that, it's portrayed, or they wanted it is all, just all the things wrong with Sparta. And it's not like what you think, and they all sucked, that kind of stuff, right? And I was thinking about that, and I was wondering first, why do you suppose there is that sort of thing? Even to the point where they say, you'll get someone who says, all the people, and I'm not kidding, all the people out there who love this battle because they feel inadequate, that they feel less than a man. And so that's why they love, Sparta and the Battle of Thermopylae, and they should know how much Sparta sucks. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but that was essentially, the argument. And I was thinking about this, and I thought, well, realistically, sure, you take Sparta as a entire society, a city-state kind of thing with their kings and all that. I'm sure you got plenty of problems in there with people who are somewheres along the spectrum of good to bad person. Like any society you have in the world, or any place where there's people, you're going to have that variation, right? So you have those things. Do you judge them, therefore, on what they were, or do you judge them on the ideal that they tried for? And then, do you then take a moment where that ideal was realized? Because you can't take away from them what they did at Thermopylae. You can't take that away from them. Battle where the king goes in first, last one out. They fight to the bitter end. Just really last stand stuff. And them and all the Greeks who actually stayed behind, really impressive stuff and all of that. Do you take away from that because of what else is the society that spawned this, if you will? Do you take away from that moment, or do you hold that moment up as the achievement of that idea?
Well, go ahead, Kelly, if you got thoughts. I have thoughts.
Does that make sense, by the way?
Yeah, no, it does. Look, from my personal opinion is it's neither. I don't hold it up as the greatest achievement of a people. I don't necessarily also castigate them for their failings as a people. I think when looking at something in a historical context, and again, speaking of myself alone, right, is I will reach opinions. I certainly have thoughts about history, right? And I certainly don't have to appreciate certain aspects of a society,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Right.
I mean, you have to look at each thing in its individual context. Did Sparta, or even by extension the greater Greek population, move human society along in some timeline? Yes, of course it did. It's like the Romans did and everybody else did,
Yeah.
right? So you take everything as it is, and I don't know. I just don't think I'm here to necessarily judge whether or not somebody was good or bad in a historical context. It was what it was. I wasn't there.
Well, no, not now. Mind you, I'm not talking about Sparta as a whole.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the battle, that instance, the battle at Thermopylae.
Yeah.
Not Sparta as a whole, but that moment.
Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah. So, as someone who apparently thinks about the Imperial Rome far more than is healthy for a normal person, as we saw on one of our other episodes, the thing about the Spartan story and any great historical story that is held up as it's become more myth now than fact. Because if you're a student of history and you start getting into the granularity, it all starts to break down. It's all very dirty when you look at it from in a true historical perspective, right? It's an ancient culture which is not particularly advanced in various methods of things that would get cleaned up in the telling of the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as Sparta goes, taking away from it based on the rest of the culture and ignoring the gravity and the inspiration that the story itself gives to people, I think it's cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Mm-hmm.
You're missing the point. The point is that it's puts forth ideals that you want.
I couldn't have said that better. That's true. Yeah, that's true. Zeus couldn't have said it better himself. Yeah.
Am I still there?
You are now, yeah.
Still there. Yeah.
Okay. So where did I leave off? That you
Say, just repeat all the coherent parts.
okay? So
Yeah.
the
Go from the
granular.
granularity, yes.
Yes. So when you get into the actual history on a granular level, on a realistic level, it becomes very dirty and can be tawdry in places that you
Yeah.
don't want it to be. But you're missing the point of the story, that it's a mythic story that is inspirational to people based on the greater themes that are involved, as opposed to, okay, well, this culture has this failing here and this failing there, but you're not taking into account the great lessons that are being taught by the story itself. And like I said, before I dropped out, it's kind of
Yeah.
like you're cutting off your nose to spite your. Look at this in such a realistic black and white, stark
Right.
contrast compared to the lesson that's being taught, and I'm just going to miss all of that because it doesn't match up exactly with my current modern day ideals.
I could not agree more with what Rich is saying, and I would like to also add to that, if I may, is that while some people would dismiss some stories as saying, well, people who fawn over the mythology of the Battle of Thermopylae are just insecure people.
Yeah.
I would say the reverse of that is people who want to detract from certain stories are simply people who are too afraid to believe in anything,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that that element exists as well. To use sort of a thought process from another movie. It's like a salad bar, man. Take what works and leave the rest.
Yeah. I
Like
was
a
thinking
salad
about
bar.
it in two analogies, if you will. One being that you have a story of someone who got the Congressional Medal of Honor. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some amazing stories about that. And Kelly and I, we saw a lot of that, of course, at the Pentagon and all that, where they got it all on the wall and all that stuff. If you take any of those stories and then say, it's all myth, based on myth, and it sucks because America sucks because of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you choose any of the evils that have happened, that's what made me think about it. Should you judge that moment on the evils of,
Nope.
because you're going to find those anywhere, or do you judge it on, okay, this is an aspiration for an ideal that was achieved in this moment and should be tried to achieve again, or to use my other analogy, if you remember from one of my favorite movies, Defending Your Life, an amazing movie, by the way,
Great movie.
where Rip Torn is talking about loaning a guy a hose and then not giving it back. And he says, I'm not the guy who fixed the flat. I'm just the guy who lost the hose, right? You keep expanding out and out, So I was thinking about it in those terms. How do you look at a moment in life? I think, honestly, I'm more of the kind of person who looks at the moment as an achievement of, because if you expand a person's life out, as far as you can, the further and further you go out, the more and more sin you're going to find, right? So wouldn't it be better to focus on the times they achieved what they were truly trying to achieve, so that you know where those bars are, rather than just saying, well, you failed here, so you suck always, no matter what you do.
No, I think it personally. I think it's incumbent upon everybody to learn as much as possible, right? Because there's the myth, and somewhere between what the mythology is and reality lies a truth, or what we think is reality. The problem in antiquity is that there's so little
Yeah.
to base your understanding on, right? If we
And
talk about somebody who received the Medal of Honor, there's a little bit more of a contemporary record. Granted, it is eyewitness testimony,
right,
Witness
yeah,
with
testimony, so forth.
right.
Yeah.
But in antiquity, it's usually somebody telling a story hundreds of years after the fact, and there's embellishment and things. It's certainly important to try to learn as much as possible. That's my particular opinion, again. And
well,
and
that's
then
why I
again,
was
you judge it based on itself and what you feel about it.
see that's why I was saying, indeed, that's why I was thinking perhaps the ideal is more important, is because, like you said, we have a hard enough time telling what happened yesterday, and we have cameras everywhere, right?
Yeah, true.
Cameras and recordings and all that, and that hadn't helped at all. Everybody thought, okay, no one's going to be able to lie anymore, and that ain't happening. So really, the only choice you have is to decide, are you going to look for the ideal, or are you going to simply dismiss all of it for whatever biases you have?
Yeah, but we have.
Well,
but we
I'm
have a-
not sure that's the right question, right? Because that's going to come down to the bias of whoever's making the observation, right? Because there
Right.
are some people, because they're like, okay, I'm going to use America as an example. America's bad,
Yeah.
right? Or the current president is bad, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, that president or that country can't do anything right. Everything they do is wrong. It's viewed in the worst possible light. Take it in politics, right? Oh, he has the wrong number or wrong letter in front of his name. He's a Democrat. He's a Republican. He's a whatever, right? Like they can't, they're on the other side of whatever the topic is. Therefore, I'm going to paint that in the worst possible light. They can't do anything wrong. They're all stupid and evil and ugly and dumb and et cetera, et cetera. When you step back and you go, okay, what did this person do? What did they vote for? What did they not vote for? What do they stand for? What did America do in the last, time frame that we're talking about? Like it's never this all good, all bad. We understand that, right? Like I'm sure that George Washington was not, 100% right on everything they did as president, but you know what? He's George freaking Washington, and I'm fine with the myth of George Washington as the first president of the country, and I have nothing but positive thoughts toward him as a person and as a president, and I don't care if that is mostly myth or partially myth. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? But
Yeah, no,
the closer we get to today, everyone's like,
But
this is terrible. And I'll give you an
Well,
example. AOC, I think she's wrong a lot of the times, but there are times where she's right, and I have to go, yeah, I agree with what she says about this, right? When she comes out and says, "Hey, Congress shouldn't be buying stocks, especially if for the oversight committees where they're involved in whatever they're overseeing, and we're letting them buy, use insider information to buy and trade stocks." And when she comes out and says, "Hey, that's not right. We shouldn't do that," I'm like, because she's AOC and she's wrong on a lot of other things, in my opinion, does that mean she should be wrong on this too? No, she's absolutely right.
That's a low bar.
Broken clock is right twice a day. So
Now,
yeah,
see,
I was going to say
well,
stop clock
look.
right twice a day.
well, that's fine, but that's what I'm talking about though. Is to bring it back to the Sparta thing. One of the things that's interesting about that one for me is that Sparta itself did not write about this stuff. They didn't write much of anything at all. All of the stuff we know about Sparta is written by other people.
Yeah,
right.
So
other
they talk,
contemporaries.
right? They talk about what Sparta was like, right? So that's why I found that one so interesting, is because there isn't anything there really from them to bias how it's seen. It's how everybody else sees them, right?
Yeah,
and so I was wondering, it's like Kelly was talking about, you go into it with your own bias, your own
right,
wants,
but
if
everyone
you will,
else
right?
who wrote about it was probably facing the same threat that Sparta was facing.
No, I get it.
So it would behoove them to build up this narrative and to make it seem like like if you're trying to like get everybody to, hey, look what they did, and that was only 300 of them. Imagine what we could do.
Yes and no.
And again, I am not trying to make a statement about what they did. I'm just saying like the other countries that wrote about this were facing the same enemy, and so there is room to go, well, they want to
that's my point, is that however you go into that story, it seems that's of course that follows, that's the result you tend to find, right? So if you love it, if you love the idea of it, you go into it with that idea, you find what you want to like it. If you go into the idea of that's just rotten this or that, that's what you're going to find, and that's what you come out with. I'm sorry.
Let me push back a little bit on Mark's point. The point being that they wrote about them contemporaneously, but they weren't writing to communicate that information to anyone else. That was for posterity. And still they wrote things that we would consider complementary values about Sparta, even though they knew no one else, like there was no newspaper or internet. They were writing that to record it And even if they didn't like the way Sparta was, they still, in being honest, wrote about things about their bravery, about their inability to surrender under overwhelming odds. They were complimentary about them, even though they knew that no one else was going to hear about it. Everything was word of mouth in those days. So, you know,
look, I understand. I don't know why you're pushing back against me. Like,
Oh, you know
that
exactly.
doesn't feel like a
You will own
pushback.
up to
Like,
it.
No,
what I'm
no,
saying
it-
is if these countries were facing the same threat, right? And so, from a propaganda standpoint,
how
we've got to
they-
fight
how
these.
they-
We've got to fight this big bad horde that wants to come take us over,
I
right?
understand.
You know, honestly,
from a
I think
and
that
again,
they
I'm not
communicate
saying I
that
don't believe it. I'm not saying it's all propaganda, but I am smart enough to realize that there is an advantage to that. I mean, let's look more recently, right? We're with
I think you're missing my point.
the Soviet Union invading Ukraine, right? We've all heard about the ghosts of Kiev, who is this badass maverick flyer.
Yes,
Turned
you're
out that
missing my
wasn't
point.
true. We've heard about the defiant group on the island who was shelled to death
Yes.
with their defiant. It turns out that wasn't true. They were all captured, right?
That is my
So
point.
war
They had
is propaganda.
Yeah, but that's my
No,
point.
go ahead. Cut me off. Go ahead.
No, because I'm cutting you off because you're making my point for me. They had
Yes,
no
I am
system.
making your point for you.
They
You're
had
welcome.
no system. No, they had no system of communication. What you're talking about are modern methods. Damn it, man. What you're talking about are modern methods of communication. That propaganda didn't exist in those days. You couldn't communicate that information to each other. Another Persia, like say you were part of Athens, and
No, I disagree. Let me stop you right there. For real, I disagree with that.
okay,
It
and
took
I
longer.
think you're wrong.
No, it took longer to share that information.
Yes,
but the entire world is all about sharing information, right?
I
That like
understand that,
they wrote
but
all kinds of things back then, and it got shared and it got passed word of mouth.
most people
Just
couldn't
because
read.
we could do it faster doesn't mean they didn't do it.
Most
They didn't
people
be like, wow, look at what these
read.
amazing Spartans did. Let me write this down and hide it over here and never tell anyone about. That is not how it went down. That's
Most
why we
citizens
know
couldn't
about
read, Mark. That's
No,
my
but
point.
no. Well, let me say something about that, Rich.
It
Is
had to
the
be
idea
word of
that people
mouth.
couldn't read is that's where the propaganda aspect comes in. And I
Yes,
think this is where the element of the listener, the person receiving the story, has to try to think about what's the point? Where are we getting with this? Because there is historical context and there is manipulation of the historical context, right? And so the story may be itself, but there's also the manipulation of that story for whatever means and ends somebody wants to use it for. Whether or not the author who wrote down the first version of what happened at Thermopylae intended it as propaganda or an attempt to capture some historical story that has been related to them over time, there it is. But somebody did pick it up and try to manipulate it. Just like people have picked up and tried to manipulate pretty much anything else they can get their hands on.
Yeah, they all do. Yeah, they all
Yeah.
do for their own. And I think honestly, that's what most of the people who dislike such things, such events, I think that's the thing that rubs them the wrong way the most of the time, is that rather than looking at the event and judging the event on what it was,
Yeah.
they look at it for how it's being used and then judge it on that. And I think that's unfair.
But throwing the baby out with the bathwater is not the right approach either.
Right, I agree.
Right. So, I mean, again, if there's something historical, rather than disbelieve in everything, which seems to be the approach of some people, or believe all of one but none of the other, I think again the appropriate approach is like the salad bar. You have to look into it, try something out.
Yeah.
Try
And
to
I think
understand what.
nowadays
And
more than ever historically, you have to have discernment. If you're
Yeah.
believing everything that comes from your chosen source of information, you're probably misinformed. Right?
yeah,
You
I
know what I
would
mean?
agree with that.
Like there's a lot of
100%.
news coming at us where you're like, does that pass the smell test? Because nowadays you can have an image or a video of anything.
See, and that's why I tend to look at the things like I was saying. I try to parse out all the other stuff, all the interpretive parts. I try to take away. I try, and then try to look at what the incident itself was. So, the incident with Sparta, people went there to defend, their land from an invading army, and they died to a man trying to do so. I think that's, that's the story. To, giving my life for my country kind of thing. And there you are. And I think that's something for someone to be willing to do that, to die to a person.
Including the king. Normally, it
Right.
would be the king would send people to do that, and the king
Right.
would be safe at home.
And that's
This is one of
actually
those examples where you're like, wow, that's
right.
leadership.
And that's one of the things that I found most interesting about it, most inspirational, is that was one of the laws they had, or traditions they had. King was the first in, last out, right? And that's how it's supposed to be. Doesn't matter if all the other instances the kings actually did it, because I know a lot of the the higher ups in society didn't have to send their kids to the Agoge and all that stuff. I get it, but Leonidas did go, and when he went to war, he did it, and he died for his country. So that's why I was saying that instance to me is what's important. And the
And
rest
now
of
that
it,
Leonidas now lends his name to chocolates, yeah, that's a great history.
hey, if you got to lend your name to something. But to me, that's why I was saying the moment is so much more important to me than expanding it out to find out if they were flawless through all of existence, because you're not going to find that,
Mm-mm.
And so that's why I wanted to ask you guys the question: is the moment and the instance and the actual incident more important than all of the rest of the cloudiness that then shows up after? When you parse away all the interpretive stuff, do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean,
What
look,
I'm saying?
the moment is important depending on what it is you're trying to get to, right? I mean, if you're looking at the Battle of Thermopylae and trying to reach some greater conclusion on, again, the history in the society of Sparta, no, I mean, all you're looking at is one tiny aspect of the
Right,
greater whole.
right,
If you're looking at moments of great human endurance and
yes,
then fine,
yeah.
then it bears relevance. But again, I think that's where the person coming into the discussion has to know what they're trying to get to.
And
What do
I
you?
would say it goes both ways. You not just with the things that people hold up as heroic and
Yeah.
outstanding and all that, but you can do that. And I'm not going to go into any instances of this, but you can find horrors that humanity has visited on humanity, and instances of those all throughout history. So whichever you're looking for, if you want the lesson of what to strive for or stay away from, you can find those things.
Hmm.
I think
Sometimes in the
that
same story.
many times. And what the sadness is that then it becomes muddied by
Yeah.
us when we start to inflict our own biases on them.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was wondering. I
Well,
just wanted to know where you guys
yeah,
stood
no, I
on
mean
on that.
the greater problem is that people want saints. Like nothing matters
Mm.
unless you're completely flawless. And I think that that's a major failing of current modern thought. Heroes are deeply flawed people, right? And that's got to be the reality. Show me
Yeah.
one single person you want to hold up as the pinnacle of all human existence, and I'll show you a deeply flawed person,
Well, that's
right?
the
We
whole
have to
heroic.
respect we have to respect the greater accomplishments of individuals, even if on the whole we may not respect the person.
Yeah,
That's the
I
whole
agree.
idea of Campbell's heroic journey. I mean, there's a failing or a setback at some point in the hero's journey, which is overcome. It's a necessity to prove the hero. It's part of the journey, and people have they've lost that in the modern era. There's been a muddying or a loss of the sense of what the journey is, to the point now where you have villains being portrayed as heroes, and as we see in things like Star Wars, where these people are villains but they call them the heroes. They've lost the ability to discern what a hero is, because they've lost the ability to relate to the idea of the hero's journey. It's terrible. It's a way to destroy a society, honestly, in my opinion.
I think that's why I'm so drawn to the moments rather than the
Hmm.
overarching story, because I think the moments are so much more important in showing what can be achieved, even if only temporarily, even if in just a moment, just that one moment. I think it's important for that. The rest of the life may be tragic or, worthless or whatever you want to throw on it. But that moment there shows that it can be done, and I think that's why it's always been so impactful for me, those moments in time. I think, as a matter of fact, that's one of the things that drew me to sculpting, was because I like the idea of that image, that one moment in time showing this one thing that was being done and capturing it, freezing it, if you will, in time to be seen. I always like that notion. And the further you expand something out, the muddier, the dirtier it gets and all that. And I think, honestly, Kelly, to your point, the reason people have a propensity to do that, I think, is because if someone achieves something like that, it takes away it takes away any excuse for you not to achieve it, right? Well, I can't find a reason I shouldn't be able to do that because they did it, unless you can start undermining it and saying, well, yeah, but they sucked at this, they were horrible at this, that kind of thing and all that, so therefore I don't have to do it because they were awful.
That's right.
But that's just a supposition, and I don't want to get into any specific mud throwing and stuff or anything on it. I just thought it was something I thought of, and I wanted to get you guys' idea or thoughts on it and see if you.
No, it's an interesting question. I like it.
So anyway, all right. Well, there you are. We've gone from the creator, which then somehow spawned that. Oh yeah, I remember what it was. Zack Snyder to 300. Gareth Edwards.
That's
to
right.
Zack
Gareth
Snyder
Edwards to
to
Zack
300,
Snyder.
which then brought it up. There you go.
6 degrees
Now
of
we know.
separation.
All right, now we just need to bring it around to Kevin Bacon, and we're all the way home.
Exactly.
I don't know how you connect that to Kevin Bacon. Was he in it?
He's a good actor.
Me neither. But he was in Tremors, which also takes place in a sandy environment. And
Well, no,
therefore, just
Tremors
like
features
300.
monsters, which is
Not
Tremors
300.
features
Sandy environments are all ripoffs of
Dune.
Dune.
Yeah.
Yes. But Tremors features monsters, which is the name of a movie by the director we were talking about, Gareth Edwards.
Oh.
Kevin Bacon should be in Dune.
Oh, he is.
Kevin Bacon should be Paul Atreides' son. That's who it should be. The actual savior. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we know, all hero stories lead back to our Lord and Savior, Paul Muad'Dib.
Yeah.
Oh, real quick, Rich,
Yeah.
Mark, did you see that? You didn't. I don't think you did. Did you see that video I sent you of the dude in what was it, Norway or Sweden, who went to the training to do so he could do a John Wick like.
Oh yeah, I did see that one.
Yes, that's an old. I've seen that one
it.
before. Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you, because Mark and I have run into this before. I know Mark was in a class where he brought this up to me. I just want to bring this up real quick. The whole thing, did you notice in there, they never carried with anything in the chamber?
Yeah, the Israeli carry, yeah.
Yeah, they were doing the Israel. Well, it's also Russian, right?
Yeah.
And I had a guy, and there was actually an American commander in Iraq, I think it was, who was doing the same thing or wanted to do the same thing. Remember, Mark, we were at that coach class, and one of the guys brought that up to me. Don't you think that's a good idea and all that? And I do not. I do not think that's a good idea. He was trying to tell me how it's just as fast and all that. No, it's not. I just wanted to get your quick opinion.
Well, from a filmmaking standpoint, it's really cool to be able to rack the slide.
Yeah.
It's just like same thing when everybody goes a shotgun. You're clearing this house, and then you getting ready to burst through that final room, and it's like shack, and you're like, "What? You've been clearing this whole house without a round in the chamber? That doesn't make sense." But it's cool to do that on film. So there's a difference between out in the real world, I'm in danger and I'm carrying a gun and I have to go to work with it, and I want to film a John Wick thing. Like, I can understand somebody going, oh, okay, well, we're going to, do this cool thing with manipulating the firearm on camera. That's as far as I would allow it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, but
you
John
get to do
Wick
cool stuff, but I hear you. I'm not defending it. I'm just saying, like,
in my experience, the with a pistol, which is a backup to the long gun, as we know,
Right.
that it should
Not
never
the
be
way
done.
I use it.
Yes, it should be never be done. Now with a long gun, from what I've experienced, it's a safety thing when it's being transported ready for use.
Well, but that's cruiser ready.
Let me,
and all that,
I got you. But that's why you don't, let's say in a vehicle, you don't, if you have a weapon storage rack, you don't leave a round in the chamber of a long gun, just for safety, and it's pulled out to be prepared to be used. That said, with a pistol, it's a much more immediate response. So to the idea that you're going to have the small, even with tons and tons and tons of practice, and that's what the people they refer to is like, well, they do it in the IDF and stuff like that. It's like, okay, yeah, you're going to train for 1,000 hours to just do that one thing, because that's what they do. In order to make that happen
all day long. And I'll tell you this, I'm
I
still going
agree.
to draw and shoot faster.
It's still going to be slower. Yeah. I agree.
Because
it's just the physics of it are slower. All things being equal.
And they tell me, look, I got a holster even that you can just push down instead of pull up. Nope. I'm
extra
step.
Beat
you to it. I'm going to beat you to it, because the motion for going up is much more intuitive and natural and meant for that than the other. So anyway. All right.
Well, I also think in modern standpoint, this idea, this is no longer the Wild West where we're facing each other at noon on Main Street, and who draws and fires fastest from their pistol is the deciding factor. Like, and let's be honest, if in the military, the pistol is the least effective weapon system employed by any military. So I think there's a lot of overemphasis on how quickly you can get the weakest defensive weapon system into play, right? I was like, okay, whatever.
As we learned in Unforgiven, it's the person who can keep their head.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's more important to be lucky.
See, my thing about the wheel of chance, right? And how much you control of it, which is that small, tiny slice, right? If that is the extra little bit of that tiny slice that gives me the edge over the other guy, why wouldn't I do it?
Right. I'm not trying to say anybody is wrong. What I am saying is, in the grand scheme of things, very few gunfights are decided by how quickly you got your pistol out and onto the target, and it's more what you did once you started shooting. It's how accurate you are. Were you using cover and concealment? Were you moving? Did you reload? Not, Wild West, bam! This fight's over because I drew and fired first and fastest.
I would say, from my professional opinion, and I don't say that very often, from my professional opinion, I give equal weight to each of those, because I do not want to be lacking in any of them.
I agree with Sean.
If someone tells me, well, you can do without this one aspect of it, I would say, no, because I don't have to, And if I don't have to, why would I? That's
the whole.
It doesn't. The whole thing is making it safer, and it doesn't make it safer. You're then under pressure in the beginning of a gunfight or middle of a gunfight, having to pull the gun out and rack the slide so that you can get up and shoot is just too much gross movement.
In the middle of an adrenaline dump, which is going to affect your fine motor skills. I agree with you 100%. I'm not advocating for the Israeli style of carry. What I'm saying is,
no.
I think we're spending a whole. Okay, I'm gonna stop right there.
Stop there. There you go.
Okay, on that note.
and just real quick, this whole mag flip thing, doing that to get the mag out, no.
Oh, yeah.
That sucks. Don't do that.
But it looks cool, dude. It looks so cool.
It looks cool.
And John Wick did it. Like, he created that.
And
professional gun
you know why he did
slingers do it.
And you know why he did it? Because Glocks don't shoot that magazine out, and they should. If you got to do that to get the magazine out of your gun so you can reload, you need a different gun.
It's a good way to instill a malfunction if you still have a round in the chamber, too.
So, Anyway. All
right. Welcome to this episode of Speak Gun Nerd and Enter.
And Sparta.
Sparta.
And the hero's journey. And Dune.
So, all right. And Kelly, I would love to talk about I wanted to talk about your dream. I would love to talk about your dream. That was amazing.
On this
The
next
name,
special
it was-
episode.
That
It was
to
amazing.
protect the
trippy.
innocent.
We'll do
Really,
that.
really trippy. I'm glad I wrote it down now because that.
Yeah,
you know,
I am too.
Very
That was-
detailed.
that was great. I would love to have an author's reading of that of that story. That was good. So
yeah.
yeah, and I love that I made an appearance, and it sounded like something I would do. Yeah,
Yeah.
it did. So
Anyway.
anyway,
at some point we'll talk about Dark Tide when everyone has a chance to play it.
Oh, that's right. We didn't
Yeah.
get around to that. So
I did
yeah.
download it. So
Okay, I downloaded it. I played through the what is it? Kind of the training
The intro
scenarios, whatever,
Yep.
until you got to the point where you're choosing missions.
back.
So that's
no
as far as
time.
I've gotten.
That's where I'm at as well.
That's right.
Straight
I
up.
played the Ogren. I played
I
the
took the
Ogren. He's all
marksman,
big and
so.
smashy.
Yeah, I took the marksman just because he has some cool costumes. So
All right, guys. Hey, don't forget Gene Father comes out today. So
indeed.
all right, boys.
All
I
right,
love you
bye.
all deeply.
Oh,
Bye.
See you.
I love you back.
This concludes our Speak Nerd and Enter broadcast.